if you're in Canada out of status, you may want to consider an application for humanitarian and compassionate consideration. I am Makrita Hibbert. Welcome to my channel. Today I will be going over what is a humanitarian and compassionate application and how such an application can help you to gain legal status in Canada. The key thing with an HnC application is that it must show that you have exceptional circumstances that warrants an officer to grant you relief from the Immigration Act to apply for permanent residency from inside Canada. Exceptional conditions ranges from a variety of things. The key areas of establishment with an HnC application are establishment, best interest of the child, ties to Canada, undue hardship, some of the main things that will determine if an applicant meets the requirements for this type of application. Because the key here is that IRCC does not want individuals to use this application as a backdoor to gaining permanent resident status in Canada, but it's an application that you would use when there is no other way. You cannot apply through any other immigration program, and your situation is so exceptional that they should consider granting you this relief and allow you to apply for permanent resident status from inside Canada. So I'm going to go through each factor in detail and break it down so that you will be able to assess your own self to see if you meet any of these criteria that this application could be your path to permanent residency. There are so many individuals who come to me and say, I want to make an application for HnC because they've gone online and they've looked up, what are the different ways that I can gain legal status in Canada, and they came across an HnC application. So now they feel that, yes, I want to make this application, or they may know someone who think that they know a lot about immigration programs, and they say, oh, you can do an HnC application. So one of the first things I ask is, how long have you been in Canada out of status? Sometimes they'll say 1 year, 2 years. Sometimes it's longer, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. If a person has been in Canada for 1 year or 2 years, then I definitely need to hear more, because right off the bat, they don't necessarily sound like an ideal candidate for an HnC, because establishment is a key factor. And in a year or two, like really, how much establishment can you have? And I always say to them, that's like being on vacation, being on an extended vacation. And an officer is going to look at that, you're not that established. You've been here only a year or two. But I must say, though, that HnC applications are not only for individuals in Canada who do not have legal status, because I have personally done multiple HnC applications for in-status individuals, but they had exceptional circumstances that we were able to put forward, and they got an approval to their HnC application. But the majority of individuals who apply are generally those who are out of status in Canada, and this is the only way forward for them. Where establishment is concerned, some of the things that they're going to be looking at are length of time in Canada. I always say 5 years is kind of my comfortable minimum if, certain things are not present. But more years, much better, because it's more time to gain establishment, and also more time to withdraw from your home country, because now you're being established in Canada. So length of time in Canada is an important factor. If you've been in Canada, say, 10 years and above, this could be something that actually benefits you. But again, not the only factor. So it would be one of the factors. Of course, all the factors have to be considered. And regarding your establishment, it's not only that you have lived in Canada for multiple years, What have you been doing during this time that you've been in Canada? How have you been bettering yourself? How have you been contributing to the economy, the community? Have you done any volunteer work? Have you given your time? Have you gone to school? Have you done any upgrading? What kind of connections have you made this entire time that you have been in Canada? Because the key is, Canada doesn't want people here who are just lazy and not doing anything. So if you're here in this country and you believe that you deserve an opportunity to remain, what have you done to the betterment of this country and to the betterment of yourself so that you can benefit this country? So those are some of the things that you have to have in place when we're assessing establishment in Canada. Do you live on your own? Do you rent an apartment? Are you self-sufficient? Are you paying your own rent, your own bills? Do you have savings? And a lot of people think that they don't want to confess that they've been working, but IRCC is no fool. You cannot be living in a country for 10 years and say that you have not worked. How are you supporting yourself? So it is best that you confess that you have been working, and then we try and explain the need for you to be working, even though it's without authorization. A key element of an HnC application is the best interest of the child. Do you have Canadian-born children? Do you have children that have grown up in Canada, though not Canadian-born? Children are very delicate, and children are never deserving of any kind of suffering or hardship. And even though a parent may have, broken the laws of Canada and have stayed here out of status, have come here and, not left when they should have, what happens to that person now will affect this child, and that factor is going to be looked at. Especially for children that are older and have lived in Canada for several years, Canada has become their home. So say, for example, a child came to Canada with their parent at 2. This child is now 10 or 15. Where else does this child know as home? Nowhere but Canada. Say this child was born in Canada. Now they are, 6, 7, they're going up in age, and you should pluck them out of their home, the only place that they know, to take them to a strange country. How will this affect the child? Is it in the child's best interest to be removed from Canada? Perhaps not, because this can impact the child emotionally, psychologically. They're going to be separated from their friends. They're going to be separated from their school. If they're engaged in activities, they're going to be pulled away from that. If they are progressing well academically, this could affect them academically if they should leave from Canada. And that child may have challenges readjusting and reestablishing in another country. So those are factors that must be taken into consideration. Even more important is if the child has any disability or medical condition, removing that child from Canada could be to their detriment. Are they going to be receiving the same care when they leave Canada? Say the child is autistic, or the child has asthma, or some health condition that may not be treated well in their home country. Then they have to look at that child's best interest and how removing that child from Canada could affect them. Volunteer work, as I mentioned in establishment, a key factor for an HnC application. And I must point out that many individuals attend churches. So they may not volunteer at, certain organizations, but they're a very active member of their church. They serve on boards, they serve on committees, they're engaged in community outreach program with their church. That is volunteer work, because churches are not-for-profit organizations. So if you're very active in your church community, that is volunteer work, and that will be considered if that is put forward in your HnC application. Then we look at ties to Canada versus ties outside of Canada. What is your family structure like in Canada? Are your parents here? Are your siblings here? Do you have a lot of family here? And what is your connection with your family member? Especially if you have an elderly family member, a parent, an aunt that has come to rely on you, will come to rely on your presence or assistance. If you should leave Canada after being with that individual for an extended period of time, this could have some kind of emotional impact on that person. So that is also taken into consideration. And then if you don't have family ties home and all your family is here, can we keep the family reunited by allowing you to stay in Canada? Something that will also be considered. So ties to Canada is very important. And I must point out, not only family ties, but your community ties. Your church, if you're a part of a church community, all your church brethren, you have become friends, you have established relationships with them. If you go to school and you have school friends, work friends, neighbors, whoever it is that you have connected with, all become a part of your ties in Canada. So ties in Canada can be an important factor for your HnC application. Then we will look at hardships. What kind of hardships are you going to be faced with if you have to leave Canada? Let's take a person who is 55 years old. That person is nearing the age of retirement. If that person has been living in Canada for 10 years, going back home and having to now find a job when they're almost retired might be difficult. So that could be hardship. If the person is uneducated and they don't have a strong educational background to help them to find a job, that could be a factor considered for hardship. Also, if the separation from the family is a grounds for hardship, if they have an elderly family member here that they're going to leave, is grounds for hardship, leaving their family. The country conditions also grounds for hardship. Are you a female going into a country where females are normally abducted, raped, or abused in some way or the other? That could be a reason that you would consider a hardship as to why you do not want to return home. So those are factors that must be considered in an HnC application. At the end of the day, an HnC could be your route to permanent resident status in Canada, but you must be able to show that the elements that I just discussed are present. Sometimes you may not have all those elements present, but you may have some, and they're strong elements. For example, the best interest of the child. And if you are able to put that properly, clearly, and persuasively in an application, that must be considered. So I would encourage you that if you are a person in Canada out of status, that you think that you may be eligible for an HnC, that you reach out to us and let us assess your case and determine if it is that you are in fact eligible for this application. And remember, an HnC is not a backdoor to gaining permanent residency in Canada. You must really have exceptional circumstances that would warrant you receiving this approval that you can apply for your permanent status in Canada. I hope that this information was very helpful to you. And if you are in this position, you are now more aware of what you can do. Thank you for stopping by. Take care.